Living in Atlanta is awesome, but there are also some things I absolutely hate about living here. So in this video, I'm going to give you my top 5 worst things about living in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's coming up right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to Living in Atlanta. This YouTube channel is all about giving you tons of great free content about what it's like to live in the Atlanta, Georgia area. My name is Marc Brenner. I'm a local realtor here in Atlanta. And if you're looking to purchase either a personal residence or an investment property in the area, I would love to talk with you. Please feel free to book an appointment with me anytime using the link in the description below. All right, so I absolutely love living in Atlanta. Obviously, I made an entire YouTube channel about why I think it's great, but I want to make sure I'm super honest about the things that aren't so great about living here. So I made a list of my top 5 worst things about living in Atlanta for the past 11 years. So number 1 on my list, and this is in no particular order by the way, I have traffic. Now, we all know Atlanta is known for having bad traffic, but how bad is it really? I mean, if you're coming from a city like Los Angeles or DC, it'll probably be a significant improvement for you. But for most of you relocating to Atlanta, the traffic is going to be surprisingly bad. So let's look at exactly how bad the traffic is. So right off the bat, I'll tell you our rush hour in Atlanta typically goes between 4:30 to 7:30 every day. Now that means if you can avoid some of the areas I'm going to mention during that time frame, it's going to save you a lot of time sitting in traffic. And believe it or not, the weekends can be pretty treacherous with traffic, especially if there's multiple sporting events or some kind of concert venue happening on the weekend, which is quite common. You do get pretty quiet streets on Saturday and Sunday morning, but other than that, there is a consistent flow of traffic all over the city on the weekends as people are out and about. So let's look specifically at where the traffic is worst in the city. Now, according to the AJC, Atlanta has 7 of the top 20 and 3 of the top 10 worst traffic jam locations of any city in the country. I'm going to point out 4 of those pain points that you want to keep on your radar so you can avoid these locations specifically. So the first location would be where I-285 meets I-85 headed north. This is otherwise known as Spaghetti Junction and probably some of the worst traffic that Atlanta has to offer. Another one of these locations would be where I-75 meets I-285 going north in the Cumberland area of Atlanta. Now, the third spot you need to be made aware of, and honestly, my own personal hell, is where 75-85 meets I-20. So you have the downtown connector where 75 and 85 merge, heading south through downtown Atlanta, and as they head south, it all converges with people trying to get on I-20. This creates a huge traffic backup that backs up for miles and miles, all the way towards where 75 and 85 eventually split going north. And the last major traffic spot I should point out for you is I-20, where it meets I-285 headed towards the east side of the perimeter. So those are just 4 major pain points that you should be aware of when you're planning on what neighborhood you're going to live in and you're charting out your commute to work. Now, the other thing I want to mention about traffic is that while it is possible to avoid some of these pain points during the rush hour, at any given time in Atlanta, there's likely to be a major accident that's causing huge buildup. And that's because we do have a lot of aggressive drivers in Atlanta, people who like to drive very fast, way over the speed limit. They will definitely tailgate you if you're driving too slow. And overall, I've noticed just an incredible increase in the amount of aggressive driving in Atlanta lately. All right, so coming in at number 2 on the list, I have public transportation. And obviously, this goes hand in hand with the traffic issue, because one of the reasons why traffic in Atlanta is so bad is because our public transportation is so lacking. And because it's so lacking, you have a lot of people that are forced to get in a car and contribute to the terrible traffic. So what does public transportation in Atlanta look like? Well, let's pull it up on a map and take a look. So here it is. This is the entirety of Atlanta's heavy rail transit system. As you can see, there are only 4 lines, and these 4 lines are extremely limited in the neighborhoods that they service. You can see that the heavy rail makes essentially a T or a cross in the heart of the city. So while this is great if you live near one of these stations, if you're like most of the population, you're probably going to have to take a car or Uber or bike or walk to a station if you do want to utilize the heavy rail. Now, for comparison, let's take a quick look at Portland's heavy rail. And Portland is a city that's just slightly bigger by population than Atlanta. And as you can see, the heavy rail system in Portland is extremely robust in comparison with our city. Now, we do have an extensive bus transit system. So if you are comfortable getting around by bus, there are plenty of bus stops, and you shouldn't have too hard of a time getting around. Although I think we can all agree Atlanta is in desperate need of a significant increase in heavy rail throughout the city. Unfortunately, what's going on in Atlanta is that you have the outer suburbs and counties who really are not cooperative in passing legislation that will fund MARTA and allow it to extend the heavy rail out towards the suburbs. I'm looking at you, Cobb County. The sad truth is, even though these surrounding counties would greatly benefit in a number of ways by having heavy rail connected into their communities, there is simply too much of a stigma and too much fear about how crime might increase by making access to these areas easy for inner city folks. So I'm really hoping we can improve on this issue as we grow as a city. But for right now, the truth is, if you live in Atlanta, you pretty much need to own a car. All right, for number 3 on my list of the worst things about living in Atlanta, I have the weather. Now, this is kind of funny to talk about because I always include weather on my favorite things about living in Atlanta. I personally absolutely love the weather here. It's an extremely sunny and mild climate, but everyone has different tastes, and if you're coming from a certain part of the country or another country, you might actually hate the weather here. So I'm just gonna run through real quick what it's like to live here throughout the year. So like I said, there is a ton of sunshine in Atlanta. We have long, hot, very humid summers. We have short, cold, and rainy winters, and we have absolutely gorgeous fall and spring seasons. Luckily for winter, it really doesn't get very cold here until late November, early December. We only get a little bit of snow flurries, maybe 1 to 5 times a year, but usually less. Very rarely do we get significant accumulation. And I'd say for the most part, the temperatures hover in the high 40s to low 50s. We do get around freezing and very occasionally dip below freezing. But overall, I would say winter here is short, chilly, and wet. So it'll really only be pretty cold in Atlanta from, say, late November to late February, early March. Summertime, I know, is a big concern for people. It does get very hot here, and more importantly, it gets extremely humid here. So I would say the real heat amps up in early to mid-June and goes well into late August, early September. We don't really get up around 100 or above 100 very often. We'll usually hover in the high 80s, and the humidity will be extremely high. But overall, I have to say, it is very beautiful here in the summer. Now, once early September rolls around, all the way up till early November, you're gonna have an absolutely gorgeous fall season. This is my favorite time of the year, and this, along with the spring season, which is from around early March to early June, you have 2 of my favorite seasons of Atlanta. Spring and fall are absolutely perfect here. You get mid-70s weather, a nice breeze. Of course, you get some occasional rain, but tons of sunshine. So like I said, overall, a very mild climate, lots of sunshine, some extreme humidity, but not extreme cold, and a gorgeous breezy spring and fall season. So if that sounded awful to you, well, Atlanta may not be the city that you want to move to, but if that sounded great to you, then maybe put this one in the pro category. All right, number 4, let's talk about crime, because depending on where you're coming from, this may be a reason for you to avoid Atlanta altogether. Now, this can be a confusing thing to really get a handle on. For instance, if you Google, is Atlanta safe, or the Atlanta crime rate, you're gonna see a sharp uptick in violent crime over the last year, but the reality is we've seen a sharp uptick in crime throughout most major metropolitan cities in America. A lot of people think this has to do mostly with the pandemic and how it's affected major cities. But I will also say, if you look at the long-term growth trends since around early 2000s, 2003, we have been on a steady decline for our crime rate. Overall, Atlanta is very much trending towards being a safer city. But by no means can we boast some of the great safety statistics that some other similar sized cities can boast. Living here for 11 years, I can tell you I have not personally experienced any violent crime, though I do know people personally who have. I've had some personal property stolen, I've had my car rifled through, but never really felt unsafe. I would say it's like a lot of other major cities. It's very easy to avoid the most dangerous, heavily drug-infested areas. Of course, you'd never want to be in those areas. And you do need to be aware of your surroundings. You need situational awareness. You definitely don't want to be leaving valuable items in your car. And if you're out for a night on the town, especially if you're a woman by yourself, you probably don't want to be walking to your car alone. In fact, a lot of these more desirable, highly walkable neighborhoods where there's a lot of nightlife is where a lot of this crime can occur. A place like East Atlanta Village, where there is a lot of nightlife, a lot of bars and restaurants. Late at night, if you park your car there, you could get broken into, and I would be really careful about walking to your car alone in that area at night. And honestly, even areas in Buckhead, I mean, there have been a rash of shootings at Lenox Mall lately. So it's a weird dichotomy where, yes, a lot of the crime is centralized in your high poverty, high drug areas, but that's not really what you have to worry about because those areas are easy to avoid anyway. I think the areas where you need to be most careful are some of these areas where there's a lot of nightlife and crowds at night where there's things to do. These can be neighborhoods that you're more likely to run into an issue with if you're not super aware of your surroundings. So overall, I would not discourage you from moving to Atlanta because of crime, but everyone has different standards, and if you're looking for the safest city in America, unfortunately, that is not Atlanta. But we do have a lot of great safe areas that you can choose to live in. All right, the last thing I have on my list is bugs. Now, this doesn't even really seem like that big of a deal to me. Believe it or not, I sat for a long time trying to think of something worse to put on this list than bugs, but I really couldn't think of anything. I mean, obviously, I love living in Atlanta. So the deal with bugs are you've got two main ones that you have to worry about. So you've got cockroaches, which really don't do anything but freak people out, and they're kind of gross to have in your home. Because we are a city in the forest and there's so much dense greenery around most of the homes in Atlanta, you will probably see cockroaches in your home from time to time. And it doesn't even have anything to do with cleanliness or having a well-insulated home. You're gonna see these bugs regardless. Now, personally, I've had a lot of success with gel bait. You can find this in Home Depot. I put these out a couple times in a year, and mostly it's taking care of the roach problem, and if I do see them, they're going to be dead, but that is something you have to be aware of. The bigger insect problem for most people, though, is going to be mosquitoes. The mosquitoes are terrible down here, especially in the hotter months. And you may be one of those lucky people who mosquitoes just miraculously avoid, but I can tell you as someone who they absolutely love, it can be awful, and a lot of times I can't even spend time outside my back deck without being covered in mosquito spray. Now, of course, there are things you can do to mitigate mosquitoes. You can get your lawn professionally sprayed, and you can just generally keep your property free from as much brush and foliage as possible, but there's really nothing you can do to avoid them completely. So overall, I don't think these things are really a big deal, but if you are coming from a city or town where you never had to deal with cockroaches or mosquitoes, just be prepared because you will be getting familiar with these two insects. Now, as I'm talking to you, something else just came to mind that I probably should have mentioned back with the weather piece, but call this number 6, call it part of the weather, whatever you want. You should be aware that if you're a person who deals with allergies, you may have a tough time in Atlanta. Our pollen counts here get absolutely ridiculous, especially in the warmer months. There's a time in the spring each year where you will walk out your door and your car will be covered in a thin sheet of pollen. Your car will be yellow-green. The pollen count gets extremely high. I'm talking record-breaking in the summer months. So if you're a person who's sensitive to pollen or just different allergens in general, you do want to be aware of that. I have lots of friends that have to take Claritin every single day just to be able to breathe. All right, so there you have it, my 5 worst things about living in Atlanta, Georgia. If you couldn't tell by now, I love living in Atlanta, Georgia, and although these are real issues you have to consider, I don't think any of them are a good enough reason to not move to this city. But I did want to counterbalance all of my positivity with some real truth about the things that aren't so great about living in Atlanta. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you find my channel informative for your move to the Atlanta area. It would mean so much to me if you subscribe to my channel, and if you do want to connect with me, you can schedule a booking in the description below. I would love to connect with you. Until my next video, I'm Marc Brenner. This is Living in Atlanta, and I'll see you next time.